Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of Svelte D3. And today we want to look into components in Svelte. So let's switch to the code editor, and I've already opened the project that we did last time when we talked about scales and circles and stuff like that. It's a simple project which just consists of this one Svelte file, which has like the script part here on top where we define some data, and then we define two functions, an x scale function and a y scale function, which is able to transform the a and b of our data into x and y coordinates in our SVG graphic here. And that's what's happening here. So in the HTML part we have the SVG, and then we have in this each block, which is looping over the data, we have like all these little circles. And what we want to do today now is to transform this circle, which is a regular SVG element here, into a Svelte component, because you try to abstract everything that you can when you build a Svelte app. And one of these circles, that's probably just a Svelte component, because the circle just needs to know where its center X and center Y position is. It needs to know a radius, and it needs to know fill. The circle doesn't need to know how A was transformed into X, and it doesn't need to know how B was transformed into Y. And that's a concept you have to think of all the time when you build front-end apps. Of course, it's the modularization concept, so you try to abstract everything into components that you could reuse, but also it's good for your architecture of the application to have this modularization. You'll see why in a few minutes probably. So what we do first is I just introduce this line here, and we introduce another circle element here with a capital C, and that says that this is now a Svelte component. So we built that in a second, but first we can think of, okay, what does this circle component needs to know? It needs an X, it needs a Y, it needs a radius, and it also needs a fill color probably. And we can now fill in basically all that we had for the circle already. So this was taking the A property of each of our data, transform it with the X scale function to an X, and we do the same for the Y here, we do the same for the radius here, and we do the same for the fill. And then we basically can cut out this regular SVG circle, and we put that now in a new file. So let's just create a new file which we call circle.svelte, and here I copy paste this circle in. So of course now in this Svelte component we do not know X scale and Y scale. It's JavaScript functions, and they are not known here in the scoped space of this Svelte component. So what we do is we introduce also here a script part, and we want to fill in X, Y, R, and fill from the outside. So we have to define these as properties of our Svelte component. And this is happening like that. So we use the export keyword and define a new variable X. Then we define a new variable Y. We define a new variable R. And lastly, we define a new variable fill. And then we can just use them here. So let's use X here, yet let's use Y here, R and fill, it's just the same names. And that's our circle Svelte component in a very basic form. It's ready. And now we have encapsulated the logic to draw the circle with X, Y, radius and fill to a separate component. This doesn't work out of the box, so here we also some curly braces missing, because circle is not yet known to this app.svelte parent component. So we have to import the circle, and I recommend to do that on the very top. So we import the circle from this new file that we just generated, circle.svelte, and this is in the same folder. So we use this dot slash notation. And now I store, and you can see that now we get the same circles basically here. And yeah, nothing really changed. We just wrote a little bit more code, but it's worth it, trust me, because now we have all the logic to draw the circle abstracted into another component, and now we can think of all the data and transformation in our parent component, and we can think of drawing the circle as such in a separate component, so we can handle these special cases a little bit differently. Well, so what I want to do now with you is to see what we can do with our new component. And to do that, I was thinking about, well, we've seen this circle image now quite some time. Let's create some more data. Well, this is just 6 circles. What if we created 1,000 circles? We can do that programmatically. So I could say, well, let's say the data is not defined as we have it here, but we're taking a new array, and we can use this from method and say, well, we want an array with length 1,000, so we have 1,000 elements, and then we loop over this array, and we can do this by map. With map, we can loop over each element of this 1,000 array, and we need here a callback function, which is looking like that in JavaScript. And within that function, we can do now something with all the 1,000 elements. They are empty right now, but we can fill them by just returning an object. And we already know that this object should have an A, a B, an R, and a fill. I'm just copying that first one here out. And with that, basically, if I delete the old data, we now generate 1,000 circles with the same properties. So if I store that, just see this one circle. Well, if I inspect that, you can see here in the code, it's 1,000 circles just overlaid over each other. Yeah, that's quite a lot, and it doesn't look very nice. So what we want to do is we want to have this A, B, and the radius, and maybe also the fill quite dynamic. So what we could do, we could just say, well, instead of this 155, just use math.random, which is calculating a random number between 0 and 1. And we just use this math.random for every number we get here, also for the radius, let's say. Then let me just format that, so now it's a little bit better to read. And for the fill, maybe let's also use some random color. We can do that by this RGB format. So here we need now 3 numbers for red, green, and blue. It could look like that basically, but let's make that random as well. So we can, in this string, template string, we can just add math.random, and as this is a number between 0 and 1, we can just multiply by 255 to get a random number between 0 and 255. And then we use this for each of the different colors. And if I store that now, we basically see nothing. Why is that? Well, the problem is that A and B is at the moment expected to be a number between 0 and 1,000, but now it's a number between 0 and 1, so basically all the circles are here, I don't know, in the top left corner probably. What we have to say is we have to change our domain. Let me just write that here a little bit more verbose. So for the xScale function, we have a domain, which is here the real space of our A's. And this is translated to a range, in our case 0 to width, and we just have to change this to 0 to 1. We do it similarly here for y, so let's say also 0 to 1, and then we store, and then we can see little circles here. They are quite small because also our radius now is between 0 and 1, which is really small. So what if we just introduce another scale function, which we call the R scale or the radius scale, and then we say, okay, yeah, input value is also between 0 and 1, but now we want something between 0 and maybe the width divided by 100. Well, that doesn't change anything. Why? Because our scale is not used yet. So we have to take here, where we take out our R from the data, we transform it with the R scale before we feed in the value into our component. And now, yeah, we can see like circles with different radii. And here we could also say, well, it could happen that a circle has a radius of 0 because of our random function. But we could say, well, let's just take a minimum radius of 5. So we see a circle also when there are circles. Well, yeah. So that's it basically. And now we can make this a little bit more funny by changing the data probably every 2 seconds or so. So what we basically could do is we now use a function which is coming from JavaScript, which is called setInterval. And this one takes a callback function, and this callback function is called every 2000 milliseconds for us. And within that here, we put in our data calculation like that. Let's format that a little bit. And then basically the data is now only known within the setInterval function. So let's define the data here as a global variable, and in the beginning it's just an empty array. And then we delete that const here, and that means the data is set every 2000 milliseconds newly. So what's happening now? After 2 seconds we get the first circles, and then 2 seconds later it's just changing because the data is calculated again, and math.random is each also running again. That means we get new coordinates, new radii, new colors, and all that kind of stuff. Looks very funny. Well, now we could say it looks funny, but a little bit of a transition in between these states could be nice as well. So let's go into our circle component, because now each circle should transition from the old to the new position. And this is now not something we add in the app.swirl, which is already 64 lines long. Well, we have here some opacity from the circle that we don't need anymore, because now we have just opacity 1 default value. So let's not make this app.svelte longer, but let's go to circle.svelte, and here basically we can add now a little bit of a transition. And there's different things possible. The easiest way, and also from a performance perspective the best way, is to use CSS to make this transition happen. And what we could do is just we could grab our circle here, and we could just put a transition on all the elements of circle, which has a duration of 1 second. And if I store that, you can already see now we get a smooth transition. You could also add some easings and stuff like that. Very nice, and maybe it looks good if we put some opacity here, let's say 0.6, so then we have a little bit transparency. And now this is looking nice. Maybe 0.8 is better. Well, yeah, this is how you build in 1000 circles with a special circle component. And to give you a little preview on my next video, if we increase now the number of circles that we have within this little SVG here, for example, let's use 10,000 circles, and I store that, then we get 10,000 circles. And now when the transition is happening, you see it's not smooth anymore. So this is not very nice. This is not a nice user experience, and you might have cases where you want to visualize 10,000 circles. But there's a solution for it, and we'll have a look at that solution next time. Just to make sure, let's go back to 1000 circles, as I will commit that, and you can find the link below the video, as well as the starter repository for Svelte plus D3. And this is also responsive still, so you can see here now that these circles are always distributed very nicely across or our browser window. Thank you for today, and see you next time when we're looking into the Canvas API. Bye.